Sometimes, the richest lessons in life don't come from money. They come from a humble cafe, a caring waitress, and a child's innocent world. The billionaire walked into the small cafe on a chilly morning, holding his little boy's hand. The place was nothing extraordinary. It was one of those corners of the city that most wealthy people never noticed, but for some reason he had chosen to step inside that day. The air smelled of fresh coffee and baked bread, and the gentle sound of clinking cups filled the background. His son, only 4 years old, had big, curious eyes that darted from one corner of the cafe to another. The boy was restless and full of life, like his father, who carried himself with a kind of strict stillness, as though every move was measured. Sat down at a table near the window, and the father opened his phone immediately, scanning through a stream of messages from his company. Numbers, contracts, and deals filled his world, but the boy was not interested in any of that. He had brought along his favorite little red toy car. As the father typed something on his phone, the boy pushed the car across the table, making soft engine noises with his lips. He giggled as it rolled to the edge, and before the father could notice, the car slipped off and bounced onto the floor. Boy's small face fell. He slid down from his chair, dropping onto his knees to look under the table. But the toy had rolled too far, disappearing into the shadows beneath the chairs and legs of strangers. The father glanced down briefly, then back at his phone, as though unsure whether to bend down or let the child figure it out himself. He wasn't used to such little moments. His life was built on big decisions, not on crawling floors to look. For lost toys, that was when the waitress noticed. She had been carrying a tray of coffee cups, her hair tied back neatly, her uniform slightly creased from the morning rush. She saw the small boy struggling on the floor and the father's distracted expression. Without a second thought, she set her tray down on the counter and walked over. "Did you lose something, little man?" she asked, lowering her voice so it didn't sound like scolding. The boy looked up with wide eyes and pointed under the table. "My car. It went there." The waitress smiled warmly. "Well, then let's go find it together." And with that, she knelt down and began crawling on the floor beside him. The cafe was in tea spotless. The floor had crumbs of bread, tiny coffee stains, and the dust that usually gathered in corners. But the waitress didn't mind. She moved around, peeking under chairs, her palms flat on the tiles. The boy instantly brightened, feeling like he had a partner in his small adventure. The billionaire looked up from his phone, startled. He watched, as this woman, who served food and carried plates all day, was now willingly crawling on the ground with his son. It wasn't part of her job, it wasn't required. But there she was, her laughter mixing with the child's giggles as they searched for the missing toy. The boy let out a squeal of excitement when he spotted the red car stuck near the leg of another chair. The waitress stretched her arm, pretending it was a tough mission, and finally pulled it out with a playful, "Got it." She handed it back to the boy with a triumphant smile, as though they had just conquered a great treasure hunt. The boy clapped his hands and hugged the toy close, then leaned against her as if they had been friends for years. Something stirred inside the billionaire as he watched the scene. He was a man who could buy any toy, replace anything broken, and hire anyone to look after his son. But in that small, ordinary cafe, a waitress had given his boy something money couldn't: shared joy, simple kindness, and a moment of playful companionship. The father found himself staring at her longer than he intended. He wasn't used to people acting without a motive around him. In his world, everyone wanted something, an opportunity, a favor, a signature. But this woman had no idea who he was. She hadn't even glanced at him properly. All her attention was on the child, her laughter genuine, her smile uncalculated. The boy climbed back onto his chair, still excited, and began driving the toy car on the edge of the table again. The waitress stood up, brushing her knees, and gave the father a polite nod. "He's a bright kid," she said, simply before walking back to her counter. The father said nothing at first. His throat felt strangely tight, wasn't used to being at a loss for words. But inside, his mind kept replaying the image of her on the floor with his son, not caring about the dust or the stares of other customers. He glanced at his boy, who was now smiling more freely than he had in weeks, for years. The billionaire had told himself that giving his son the best schools, the best clothes, the most expensive toys, and a future filled with security was enough. But watching his child light up over something as small as a waitress crawling on the floor made him realize how empty those beliefs were. His son didn't need luxury. He needed connection, needed warmth. The cafe buzzed on around them, but for the father, time felt slower. He noticed details he had never bothered to see before. The sound of the barista humming behind the counter, the faint chatter of two old men at the corner table, the way the waitress tied her apron tightly as she served a group of students. Life in that cafe felt simple, yet it carried a richness that his glass-walled office never had. The boy looked up at his father suddenly and said, "Daddy, she's nice. Can she play again?" The billionaire blinked, caught off guard by the question. His son rarely asked about people outside the family or the house staff. But here he was, hoping for another chance to play with a stranger. The father forced a smile and nodded slightly, though he knew he couldn't command such moments. They had to happen naturally. As they left the cafe later that morning, the billionaire kept glancing back at the waitress, who was now serving another table with the same patience she had shown his son. He didn't even know her name, but he couldn't shake off the image of her crawling beside his boy. Something about that scene felt important, almost like a message meant for him, a reminder that life was not about standing tall all the time. Sometimes it was about kneeling down, lowering yourself, sharing the world from a child's eye level. That day, as he drove away in his black luxury car, his son asleep in the back seat clutching the red toy car tightly, the billionaire found himself unusually silent. He had attended board meetings where billions were at stake, and he had never once doubted his decisions. But now, over something as small as a toy under a table, he felt his beliefs begin to shift. He didn't know why, but he sensed that everything might be about to change because of a waitress, a child, and a simple act of crawling on the floor. The billionaire sat alone in his study that evening, the city lights stretching endlessly through the tall windows of his penthouse. His son was already asleep in his room, hugging the same red toy car that had rolled under the table earlier. That day, normally, nights for the billionaire were filled with calls, spreadsheets, and endless discussions with lawyers and managers. But tonight, he wasn't thinking about contracts or profits. His mind kept returning to the small cafe, to the moment he saw the waitress crawling on the floor. Beside his son, he poured himself a glass of water and walked slowly across the room. The silence felt heavier than usual. For the first time in years, his thoughts drifted to his own childhood. He remembered a large house filled with expensive things, but strangely empty of warmth. His father had been a powerful man too, always. Locked away in offices, leaving him with nannies who cared more about their schedules than his feelings. He remembered looking at his father across long dining tables, wishing he would just laugh with him, or play even once. But those wishes were never answered. His father believed discipline and wealth were enough to build a man. Now, as he thought about his little boy, he felt a pinch of fear. Was he repeating the same mistake? Was he giving his son everything except the one thing that mattered? An image of his son's bright smile, when the waitress joined him on the floor, replayed again and again in his head. That smile wasn't for the toy car, nor for the cafe. It was for the human connection, the joy of someone entering his little world without hesitation. The billionaire leaned back into his chair and sighed deeply. He realized he didn't even know how to play with his son. His time with him usually involved scheduled outings, tutors, or buying him something new. But sitting on the floor, laughing, crawling under a table, that was something he had never done. It wasn't because he didn't love his son. It was because he didn't know how. Nobody had ever shown him what it meant. The next morning, when he entered the dining room, his son ran to him with the toy car. "Daddy, look! Vroom, vroom!" the boy said, driving it across the floor. For a moment, the billionaire thought about kneeling down and joining him, but something inside him froze. He gave a small smile, patted the boy's head, and sat at the table to sip his coffee. His son played alone again. The guilt sat heavy on his chest. Later that day, he had back-to-back meetings. His assistants rushed in with files, charts, and contracts. Words like merger, investment, and shareholders filled the room. He nodded and made decisions with his usual precision, but in the back of his mind, the picture of the waitress laughing with his son never left him. Her face was ordinary, her clothes plain, but the warmth she gave so easily seemed more valuable than all the deals he was sealing. That evening, instead of going straight home, he instructed his driver to take him back to the cafe. It was unusual for him to return to the same small place, but something inside him wanted to. He stepped in quietly, his expensive shoes tapping against the wooden floor. The cafe was less crowded this time. He spotted her behind the counter, tying her apron as she prepared a tray. She didn't notice him at first. She was too busy greeting a couple of elderly customers with the same cheerful energy she had shown his son. He sat at a corner table, pretending to read a newspaper, but his eyes kept drifting toward her. She wasn't glamorous or polished like the women he usually met at charity galas or corporate dinners. Her hands were slightly rough from work, her hair a little messy from rushing around. Yet there was a sincerity in her every move that caught his attention. She carried cups of coffee with a smile, listened carefully when customers spoke, and even bent down to wipe a spilled drink without a single complaint. When she finally approached his table, she greeted him with the same simple kindness. "Good evening. What can I get for you today?" she asked, not recognizing him as the wealthy man he was. He ordered a black coffee, his voice calmer than usual. He wanted to ask her name, but he stopped himself. Instead, he simply watched as she scribbled the order and walked away, noticed how she moved quickly, but never made anyone feel rushed. Everyone seemed to like her, not because of what she did, but because of how she made them feel. As he sipped his coffee, he thought about his own employees. In his world, people smiled because they had to, not because they wanted to. They shook his hand to gain something, not because they cared. But here, this waitress treated every customer with the same respect, whether it was a businessman in a suit or a tired student counting coins to pay for tea. The billionaire left the cafe that night without saying much. But when he returned home, his son ran to him again, asking, "Daddy, did you see the nice lady? Did you see her?" The boy's excitement surprised him. Children rarely remembered strangers, yet his son had. It was a sign. That brief connection had left a mark not just on him, but on the child too. For the next few days, the billionaire found himself distracted. He tried focusing on his company's expansion projects, on stock values, on meetings with investors, but none of it gave him the satisfaction it once did. He realized he was starting to measure value differently, not in numbers, but in moments. The sound of his son's laughter echoed in his memory louder than the applause of board members. The warmth of the waitress's gesture felt richer than the finest wine served at his luxury dinners. One evening, he sat beside his son while the boy played with his toys. He watched quietly, his mind heavy with questions. What kind of father did he want to be? What kind of childhood did he want his boy to remember? He imagined his son growing up the same way he did, lonely in a big house, surrounded by everything except real attention. The thought scared him. For the first time, the billionaire admitted to himself that money had blinded him. He had believed for so long that providing material comfort was enough. But he now saw that children craved love more than toys, presents more than presents. He realized that while he had worked so hard to build an empire, he was at risk of losing the one thing that truly mattered: his son's happiness. The next morning, he decided to make small changes. Instead of leaving for work immediately, he sat with his boy during breakfast. He asked him questions, even if they were simple ones about cartoons or toys. The boy's eyes lit up with surprise. It wasn't perfect, and the father still struggled to act playful, but it was a start in his heart. He knew the waitress had played a role in this awakening. Without meaning to, she had shown him what genuine care looked like. By crawling on the floor with his son, she had opened a door he didn't know existed. She reminded him of something he had long forgotten: that true connection required lowering yourself, not standing above others. As days passed, the billionaire couldn't shake off the feeling that he had more to learn from her, not about business, but about life, about kindness, about being human. The cafe had become a quiet place of comfort for the billionaire. At first, He had gone there only because of that one surprising moment with the waitress and his son. But now, without even realizing it, he found himself returning again and again. It was strange for a man like him. He had never been the type to visit the same ordinary place twice. His life was filled with luxury restaurants, private clubs, and meetings in tall glass towers. Yet somehow this little cafe, with its simple wooden chairs and warm smell of coffee, had begun to pull him in like nothing else. His son was always the happiest when they went there. The boy would hold his father's hand tightly, tugging him eagerly toward the familiar door. The child no longer cared about the expensive toys that filled his large room at home. What he wanted instead was the chance to see the waitress again. He would chatter the whole way in the car, asking if she would be there that day. She would play again, if she remembered him. The billionaire noticed how alive his son became whenever he spoke about her. It was almost as if the boy had discovered a new world, a world outside of shiny things and lonely spaces. And so, the father continued to bring him. Even when his schedule was tight, the waitress welcomed them each time with the same gentle smile. She never treated the billionaire differently from anyone else. She didn't seem to know who he really was. And even if she did, she didn't show any sign of caring. She treated him as just another customer, sometimes even joking lightly with him the way she did with the others. It was refreshing, almost strange. For a man who was so used to being recognized everywhere he went, the boy grew attached quickly. Whenever he spotted her, he would wave excitedly and call out her name. Her name, he had learned one morning, was Anna. She always bent down to his level, greeting him like an old friend. Sometimes, if the cafe wasn't too busy, she would sit for a moment and let him show her his toy cars. Other times, she would bring him a cookie from the counter, telling him he had to finish his milk first if he wanted it. The boy laughed with her, listened to her, and even told her little secrets in his childlike voice. The kind of secrets he never shared with his father. The billionaire watched all of this quietly. He was not used to watching someone else take such a place in his son's heart. At first, it made him uncomfortable. But soon he realized that Anna was not taking anything away from him. She was giving something to his boy that he himself had failed to give. She was giving warmth. One afternoon, the cafe was quiet, with only a few people scattered at the tables. The billionaire sat with his son, sipping his coffee slowly. Anna came by to check on them, smiling as always. She asked the boy about his toy car, and he proudly showed her how fast it could roll across the table. Then, without thinking, she laughed and rolled it back to him. They played like that for a while, the little red car sliding back and forth, the boy giggling every time. The billionaire watched them closely, feeling something he could not quite explain. He realized he was smiling too, a real smile, not the polite one he wore in boardrooms. For once he was not thinking about work, not thinking about money, not thinking about tomorrow. He was simply watching his son laugh, and that felt more valuable than anything else. When Anna stood up to leave, the billionaire stopped her with a soft question. "Do you always have this much patience with children?" She looked at him, a little surprised, then shrugged lightly. "Children need patience. They deserve it. The world is too fast for them. Sometimes you just have to slow down and see things the way they do." Her words stayed with him long after she returned to her counter. They were simple words, but they carried a weight he could not ignore. That night, when he put his son to bed, he remembered them again. He sat by the boy's side longer than usual, listening to his sleepy murmurs about the day. He realized he was slowing down, just as she had said. As the days turned into weeks, the visits to the cafe became a habit. The billionaire began to notice more about Anna. She was always kind to everyone, no matter who they were. An old man who came in every morning for tea was greeted with the same respect as the businessman who ordered the most expensive coffee. She often bent down to help customers carry bags or to comfort a crying child. She laughed easily even. When she was tired and never seemed to lose her patience, the billionaire found himself studying her quietly. He compared her to the people in his world, the board members, the investors, the socialites who filled his evenings with shallow conversations. None of them carried the same honesty as she did. None of them gave without expecting something in return. It wasn't just his son who was drawn to her anymore. He felt it too, didn't understand it, and he didn't want to name it, but he knew it was there. Every time he stepped into that cafe, he felt lighter, as if he was leaving behind the weight of his empire at the door. One rainy afternoon, the cafe was almost empty. The billionaire sat at his usual corner, his son busy coloring on a piece of paper Anna had given him. She approached with a cup of coffee and placed it in front of him. For the first time, they spoke longer than a few polite words. She told him about her job, about how she worked long hours but enjoyed meeting different people every day. She laughed about small mistakes she sometimes made, like mixing up orders or spilling milk, and how the regular customers teased her. Kindly about it, the billionaire listened more than he spoke, which was unusual for him. He was used to being the one in control, the one everyone listened to. But here he found himself curious about her life, wanted to know more, not because it was useful to him, but simply because it mattered. His son looked up from his drawing and proudly showed Anna his messy picture of a car. She clapped her hands and told him it was wonderful, even though the lines were crooked and the wheels were too big. The boy beamed with pride, and the billionaire felt a sting in his chest. He realized his son looked for her approval more than his own. That night, as he drove home, the billionaire thought deeply about everything. He was beginning to understand that his son's happiness was not found in grand gestures or expensive things, but in the simplest of moments, someone laughing, someone crawling on the floor. And strangely enough, this woman, this ordinary waitress, had become the one to teach him that. He didn't know what the future held, but he knew that something was changing. His life, once filled only with wealth and power, was slowly opening to something else, something softer, something he had never thought he needed. And it all began with a boy, a toy car, and a woman who cared enough to kneel down on the floor without hesitation. The days after that afternoon in the cafe felt different for the billionaire. He began to notice things he had never paid attention to before. Life had always been a blur of meetings, phone calls, and decisions, all revolving around money, power, and influence. But now, when he returned home after a day at work, he found himself thinking about a small cafe, a young boy, and a woman named Anna, the world he had built around him. Its tall glass towers and endless luxuries suddenly seemed hollow. Compared to the simple warmth he witnessed there, every morning he woke up earlier than usual, driven by a strange excitement to spend time with his son at the cafe. He had never thought of mornings as something enjoyable. They had always been rushed, full of deadlines and schedules. But now, mornings meant laughter, tiny footsteps running toward a wooden door, and the soft smell of coffee drifting through the air. The boy would jump into the car, practically pulling his father along, chattering endlessly about the day ahead, asking questions, making wild predictions about what Anna might be doing when they arrived. Anna had become the center of their little world outside the mansion. She was no longer just a friendly waitress. She was a teacher of life's simplest truths. The billionaire noticed how effortlessly she connected with everyone in the cafe. Children adored her, and even the grumpiest of customers softened when she smiled. She had an unusual gift. He realized, a way of making people feel seen and valued without expecting anything in return. It was something he had never truly experienced himself. Surrounded as he was by people who were polite but calculated, kind but transactional, on one rainy afternoon the cafe was quiet and the usual hustle of customers was absent. His son was drawing pictures with crayons on a scrap of paper Anna had given him, while she, kneeling down beside him, patiently guiding his tiny hands to create shapes. She was laughing gently at his mistakes, telling him that crooked lines could be beautiful too. The billionaire stood a little away, watching silently, felt a lump in his throat he couldn't explain. Seeing his son so happy, so completely absorbed in the joy of a simple interaction, awakened feelings in him he hadn't recognized in years. He began to notice small details about Anna that made her extraordinary. The way her hair fell loosely around her shoulders, the way her eyes lit up when she laughed, the way she remembered each customer's little quirks and preferences without ever making them feel like they were being judged. Her patience was remarkable. She would bend down. 2 children kneel to speak at their level, or even crawl along the floor to retrieve a dropped toy. It was a stark contrast to the life he had always known, where power often meant looking down on others, not kneeling to see the world through their eyes. The billionaire realized he was learning something from her, though he didn't know how to name it. He started questioning his own life choices, the years he had spent chasing numbers, building empires, and controlling people. He remembered his son's laughter when Anna crawled on the floor to play. That simple act which he had, once dismissed as trivial, now seemed profound. It was a lesson in humility, in connection, in love, that demanded nothing in return. He began to understand that wealth alone could never create the joy he now witnessed in his son's eyes. Their afternoons at the cafe became a ritual. The boy would rush to Anna with a new toy or drawing each day, and she would greet him with the same warmth, crouching or kneeling, laughing and encouraging him. The billionaire would sit quietly, sipping his coffee, watching the two of them interact. Sometimes he even joined in, though awkwardly at first, playing with the boy's toy cars, or helping him build little structures with blocks. Each time, he felt something unfamiliar, a sense of peace that no amount of money could buy. The billionaire began to reflect on his own childhood, which had been lonely and disciplined, full of expectations rather than warmth. He remembered moments of longing for attention, for someone to simply notice him for who he was, rather than what he could achieve. Watching his son with Anna made him confront those old feelings, and he realized he wanted something different. For the boy didn't want his son to grow up with the same sense of emptiness he had felt. He wanted him to know joy, empathy, and connection. Anna, without realizing it, had become a guide for both father and son. Her kindness was effortless, her attention genuine, and her presence grounding. The billionaire started seeing her in a new light, not just as a friendly waitress, but as someone who held the power to change lives simply by being herself. He noticed how she treated everyone equally, whether a child, an elderly customer, or a stranger passing by. There was no pretense, no hierarchy, just pure human connection. One day, as they sat together, his son leaned on the table, looking up at Anna with wide eyes, and asked a question that made the billionaire pause. "Why do you always play with me? You could be doing other things." Anna smiled, her eyes soft, because everyone deserves someone to care about them, even for a little while. "And playing with you is one of the best parts of my day." The simplicity of her words struck the billionaire deeply. He realized that despite all his wealth, he had rarely spent time doing something purely for love, without expectation or calculation. Anna had given that gift to his son every day, and in turn, she had given it to him too. The billionaire started making small changes in his life. He spent less time in meetings that could wait, less time worrying about profits that were already more than he needed. He dedicated more time to his son, not just at the cafe, but in small moments at home, reading bedtime stories, playing games, and talking about the boy's day. He found himself learning patience, humility, and the kind of joy that comes from seeing the world through someone else's eyes. His interactions with Anna also began to influence the way he treated people in his business and personal life. He noticed that listening, understanding, and giving attention were more powerful than he had ever imagined. Even small acts of kindness had a ripple effect, creating trust and connection where previously there had been only formality and distance. One evening, the cafe was quieter than usual. The billionaire's son was fast asleep, and Anna was wiping down the tables. The billionaire sat at the corner table, thinking about the days they had spent here. He realized that his perspective on life had shifted profoundly. It was not the wealth, the titles, or the power that mattered most. It was these simple moments of connection, care, and presence. Anna had unwittingly become the teacher he never knew he needed, and his son had been her student, learning lessons that would stay with him for a lifetime. He also began to understand that this change was not temporary. The joy, the patience, and the empathy he had discovered could shape the way he lived from now on. He no longer saw the cafe as just a place to visit. It had become a sanctuary, a space where real lessons in life were unfolding every day. The billionaire knew that the world outside was still filled with expectations, pressures, and responsibilities. But he had discovered a balance, a way to integrate love, care, and attention into a life that had once been dominated by ambition alone. The boy laughed, Anna smiled, and he finally understood that wealth could never compete with the richness of human connection. And so each visit to the cafe became more than a routine. It became a celebration of simple joys, of learning to slow down, of discovering that the most profound moments in life are often the smallest ones. He watched his son and Anna, feeling a warmth that was unfamiliar yet comforting, realizing that everything in his life could change not through money or influence, but through the quiet power of care, laughter, and connection. Every day brought new lessons, new small joys, and new ways to see the world. The billionaire began to live differently, act differently, and feel differently. All because of a little boy, a simple waitress, and the moments they shared crawling on the floor, drawing pictures, and laughing together. It was a change that went deeper than anything his wealth had ever offered, a change that promised to last a lifetime. The weeks turned into months, and the billionaire found his life transforming in ways he had never imagined. Each day at the cafe became a lesson, a moment of clarity, and a reminder that the world he had built of glass towers, boardrooms, and endless calculations was only a small part of life. At first, he had thought his visits were just about spending time with his son, but slowly, he realized that these afternoons were changing him in the deepest sense. The boy thrived under Anna's guidance, his imagination and confidence growing. With each passing day, he would arrive at the cafe bursting with ideas, new stories, or small inventions crafted from whatever materials he could find. Anna encouraged every thought, every creation, praising him genuinely and teaching him that mistakes were just steps toward discovery. The billionaire watched with awe, realizing that this environment of support and love was something he had longed for as a child, but had rarely experienced. One afternoon, the billionaire found himself drawn into one of the boy's adventures. Anna was helping him construct a miniature castle out of cardboard, glue, and colored paper. The boy insisted that his father join in. At first, the billionaire hesitated, awkwardly handling the paper and scissors. But soon, laughter filled the air as glue stuck to fingers and paper towers tumbled down. Anna crouched next to them, laughing and encouraging, showing that fun and learning could coexist. It was a feeling he had never encountered in his meticulously ordered life, complete freedom, joy, presence in the moment. The billionaire began noticing small, unexpected changes in himself. He became more patient, more willing to listen, and less concerned with perfection. His interactions at work started to shift too. He treated employees with greater understanding and empathy, realizing that respect and encouragement could achieve more than authority and pressure ever had. He started attending meetings not just with a focus on results, but with a genuine interest in people's ideas, their struggles, and their dreams. Those who had previously felt like cogs in a machine now became collaborators, and he noticed a new energy in his company as a result. At home, he spent hours with his son, not as a distant provider, but as a true father, present and engaged. They cooked meals together, read books, and even built small projects inspired by the boy's growing curiosity. The mansion, once a place of loneliness and empty opulence, now echoed with laughter and creativity. The billionaire began to understand that love, time, and attention were more valuable than any luxury he had ever possessed. Anna remained the constant heart of their afternoons. She never sought recognition, never asked for reward, yet her influence on the billionaire and his son was undeniable. Her wisdom, kindness, and ability to find joy in small things reshaped the way they approached life. The billionaire noticed that her presence encouraged a sense of community. Customers who had once been strangers began to connect with one another, sharing stories, helping each other, and fostering a warm environment that extended beyond the cafe's walls. One evening, after a particularly long day, the billionaire sat with Anna while the boy had gone home. They talked quietly, away from the clatter of dishes and the hum of conversation. He shared how the afternoons at the cafe had changed him, how he had begun to see the world differently. Anna listened, nodding gently, her calm presence comforting him in ways he had never experienced. He realized that her impact was not just on his son, but on him too, transforming his understanding of life, happiness, purpose. The billionaire began to plan ways to integrate these lessons into his broader life. He initiated programs at his company to support creativity, kindness, and learning, not just profit. He invested in community projects, mentoring programs, and educational initiatives that allowed children and adults alike to experience the same nurturing environment his son had found in the cafe. He realized that true wealth was measured not by money in the bank, but by the positive impact one could have on others' lives. At the cafe, their afternoons continued to be filled with laughter, play, and discovery. The boy's imagination flourished. He invented new games, created intricate stories, and learned lessons of empathy and kindness through each interaction with Anna. The billionaire, too, continued to grow, discovering the importance of humility, patience, and genuine human connection. He learned to celebrate small victories, to value effort over results, and to understand that happiness often came from the simplest acts of love and care. Over time, the bond between the billionaire, his son, and Anna deepened. It was a relationship built not on obligation, but on mutual respect, trust, and joy. The boy began to show remarkable empathy and insight, often noticing when someone needed a smile or a kind word. The billionaire saw in him a reflection of the lessons Anna had imparted, and he felt a profound gratitude for the way her presence had reshaped their lives. The transformation was visible in the billionaire's demeanor. Where once he had been tense, serious, and focused solely on achievement, he now carried a gentle warmth. People who met him noticed the difference. His smile was genuine, his attention sincere, and his interactions infused with empathy. He had discovered a new form of power, the power to nurture, inspire, and uplift those around him. The cafe became more than just a place to visit. It was a sanctuary, a classroom, and a haven of joy. Every visit reinforced the lessons of connection, patience, and unconditional care. The billionaire began documenting his experiences, thinking about how he could share this wisdom with a wider audience, hoping that others might also discover the transformative power of small acts of love and attention. One memorable day, the boy suggested they organize a small event at the cafe for the local community. Anna and the billionaire agreed, and soon the cafe was buzzing with families, children, and neighbors coming together to share stories, games, and food. The billionaire watched as his son guided other children through activities, his confidence and compassion shining brightly. Anna moved through the crowd, smiling and encouraging, embodying the heart of the event. The billionaire felt a surge of pride and joy, realizing that this simple idea had created ripples of happiness far beyond what he had ever imagined. Through all these experiences, the billionaire learned to let go of rigid control, to embrace uncertainty, and to celebrate the beauty of imperfection. He discovered that true leadership, whether in business or in life, required empathy, listening, and the willingness to learn from others, regardless of their status or background. Anna, with her simple wisdom and generous heart, had taught him lessons that no boardroom or contract ever could, as months turned into years. The billionaire's life had been irrevocably changed. The mansion remained, the company continued to thrive, but the essence of his world had shifted. He measured success not only in wealth, but in love, connection, and the happiness of his son. He had learned to find joy in the ordinary, to see beauty in small acts of kindness, and to recognize the profound impact one person could have on the lives of many. The bond they shared became a story in itself, a tale of transformation, of lessons learned through play, laughter, and attention. To the small things in life, the billionaire, once distant and preoccupied with material success, had become a father who truly understood and cherished his child. He had learned from Anna that life's richest moments often came unplanned, quietly unfolding in the spaces where love, patience, and joy intersected. He also realized that this transformation was ongoing. Every day presented new opportunities to practice empathy, generosity, and presence. Each interaction with his son, with Anna, and with the world outside reminded him that change was a continuous journey, not a single moment. The billionaire embraced this journey, fully aware that wealth, status, and power were fleeting. But love, care, and human connection were timeless. Through these experiences, he saw that life could be measured in laughter shared, hands held, and hearts touched. The lessons he had learned at the cafe extended far beyond its walls, shaping not only his family's life, but the lives of everyone he interacted with. He had discovered that the simplest acts, like kneeling to play with a child or listening with full attention, could create the deepest and most lasting impact. As he watched his son running across the cafe floor, with Anna close behind, laughter echoing around them, the billionaire felt a profound peace. He understood that life's true value was not counted in dollars or possessions, but in the moments of genuine connection. The acts of kindness that ripple quietly through the world, and the love that binds people together across generations. The transformation had reached a point where it became natural, a part of their daily rhythm. The boy, Anna, and the billionaire formed a small circle of influence, teaching and inspiring everyone around them. The billionaire realized that the lessons he had learned were no longer theoretical. They were lived experiences, shaping his actions, his decisions, and his heart. In the end, the billionaire understood something essential: life's greatest wealth is not what you hold, but what you give. He had discovered a richness that could not be bought, earned, or inherited, a richness that came from empathy, presence, and the courage to change. His son had flourished, Anna had shared her quiet wisdom, and he had finally found a life of meaning, joy, and purpose. The cafe, the laughter, and the small acts of care had created a ripple that would continue indefinitely, touching lives in ways that were impossible to measure. And as the billionaire watched his son and Anna one more time, he knew that everything in his life, his priorities, his values, and his understanding of true happiness had been forever transformed, not by wealth or power, but by love, connection, the extraordinary impact of ordinary moments shared with extraordinary people.